Hi, I'm Alan. I work mostly in biology and art, and I'm really interested in non-human consciousness, consciousness even of bacteria. And so when I talk about non-anthropocentric ideas, I'm talking about both thinking for non-humans and assessing how non-humans think for themselves, but also beginning to try to think of ourselves as non-humans. We're animals. We're beasts first. It's not that the human becomes a beast, but that somehow the beast is becoming human.
Welcome to Vascal. I'm going to talk about the school, and then I'm going to talk about the class, and then I'm going to talk about eco-art, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I was talking about here. And if I can do all that in an hour, good. Because actually today we're going to go outside with sort of what I was talking about, a bunch of earth and shit and clay and seeds and make sculptures. And then let them go. So this is Vastal, the Vivo Art School for Transgenic Aesthetics Limited. All right, so welcome. The course that we're giving is called Vivo Art, and I'll try to explain it. People divide the life world up into ecology, food, biology, non-human consciousness or non-human being, and body, our own bodies. And when we mix these things, it sort of gets uncomfortable, right? Not always, but when someone says, ooh, you'd be a great biological specimen, you get a little nervous, you know? When someone says, do you think that what you're eating has a kind of consciousness or being, or at least feelings, people get nervous. The idea of the course is that we study these 5 forms of art, and these are alternative names for them here, and then we try to mix them all together in one piece of art. Today we're doing eco art. It's the first one. Next week on Saturday we'll be back out in the market. We got a permit for both days doing food art. And that's like we'll have a pile of strange foods and we put them all in a blender. I guess you can bring a sample of anything with DNA in it, okay? Anything goes from cat shit to, just it has to be raw, pretty much, you know? And from one of the 5 phylums, the kingdoms. We also bring in people to speak, sometimes Vivo artists. We've got 3 of them on Tuesday that work with ecology and biology. And they're all twisted in their own way. Brandon Ballanty, Boot Chapel, and Andy Gracie are coming in. And Thune, how do I say your last name?
Carlson.
Carlson. Thune Carlson is going to be here too. So and he's here today to help us. And then we do field trips. We're doing one today, damn it. So I'm going to get us out of here, but these are the type of places that if we don't go to, that as a student in this course you might end up going to do a little ethnography. So hang out at a hospital or a slaughterhouse. These are the places where those things, they do get mixed up, right? Strangely. And then we do labs. Today is seed broadcasting, okay? Seed broadcasting is a kind of new media broadcasting. So we're going to start a radio station, but instead of using radio waves, we're using germ cells, embryos, seeds that are fertilized and starting to grow inside those little capsules, but with a little water and earth, they pop, and we're broadcasting, and it's an interspecies communication, right? Where we're sending the seeds out, sort of to say what we want them to say, but they don't just say what we want them to say. They say what they want to say too, because they're not us, they're them. So anyway, we will do bacterial transformation in September, which is to make transgenic bacteria, paint with it. And in November we'll do some embryology, avian embryology, along with animal enrichment and using our bodies. And next week is the hybrid DNA extraction. That's the food plan. We'll be there. I can't say that much about bioart because bioart only sort of even exists. Like, starting to get a name for itself, but there is no manifesto, there's no one way of doing it. Actually, everybody's different, and it's kind of nice that way. Actually, there is something to what's going on. One is to remember that we're alive. Just that we're alive, we're mortal, our bodies were sort of a gift to us, and they're passing, and so we should have some living experience of vital moments before we're gone. Yeah? The other is to make sure that people have experience with science the wrong way, in some ways, like demystified. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Taking a look behind the curtain and finding out that it's not that different from, say, cooking or analyzing the behavior of your pet. Like, why is my cat acting like that? That's a scientific question, okay? But also some of the more controversial things like embryology and transgenics. One of my major focuses has to do with the engineering of animals, plants, all different organisms, but also ourselves, which I think we're starting to do. And so what does that mean? Well, we need people that actually know what that means, that aren't scientists, that aren't working for corporations, that are just sort of like creative individuals that might have their own opinion. I guess that would be making labs to get rid of also fears of complexity, so that people have their own opinion and they're not intimidated by, wow, that's just too much for me, or something like that. And then, it's true, we're trying to take a look at relationships between what human culture is supposedly and other living beings that are not human and the environment. Kind of reworking preconceptions, because we do all have relationships, but not all our relationships are good. That includes between humans too, right? Does everybody here have only good relationships with humans so far? Yeah. Yeah, it's like, wow. Again, we have eco arts, which is, I'm extra interested in eco-vention. We'll look at that. Culinary arts, which is like gastronomy. What is it, bio-arts? These are all under vivo arts, which is wet biology art practice. But what I get into over here is like, some people are into molecular biology art, and some people are into tissue culture, and some people are into making mutagenized or mutant organisms. Now, you need molecular biology and tissue culture sometimes to make transgenic organisms. But the tissue culture people don't want to be known as genetic artists, so there's actually an invisible line here. Maybe you can see that, right? That connects. And like I said, my major focus, besides just interrogating the life world and seeing whether or not we can remake our ideas about it, is that I think that off the record, we are making genetically modified humans. I'm not so anthropocentric to say like, wow, that's really different than making all the genetically modified organisms that already exist in the world. I'm not that attached to us either, like as the form that we're in, but I do think that there's some reason to worry, and it's more for me. Maybe I'm simple, but I'm more worried about aesthetics. I'm like, I don't just want people to have bigger brains. I don't think bigger frontal lobes in particular is the best idea. I have trouble with my frontal lobes already. And in particular, like, why are we focusing on bigger frontal lobes and not bigger hippocampuses? So we'd have like a wider range of emotion, because emotion is undervalued and intelligence is overvalued right now. And especially if you're a scientist, right? What scientist wants to become more emotional through genetic engineering? That wouldn't get them more papers published, probably less. But this type of thing, this is what I call aesthetics, but it's aesthetics of actually future humans existing in bodily form influenced by aesthetics. And sometimes it's not apparent that it is an aesthetic because it's so popular or so reasonable, but reasonable is an aesthetic. So I'm the unreasonable other. So now I'm going to move really quickly to eco art. A brief intro, because Actually, I don't want to say too much about eco art because we're going to do it today, and that will mess up our doing it if we know too much. So, other names for it, yes, ecovention, and there's a website called, I think it's at greenmuseum.org. Oh wait, I have it here. Yeah, it's a book called Ecovention at greenmuseum.org. It's free. You can buy it too on Amazon, but they have it free online, and it's amazing. It's all about activist eco art, and it's a really nice historical document, and it includes some right up to like 2000 when it was printed or something. Well, even Spiral Jetty Man, Robert Smithson, was like, actually, he was sort of like, I made that spiral jetty at a toxic waste strip mine, you know, and I didn't want it to be beautiful. I wanted to decorate an ugly place to say, take a look at the strip mine in the background. He was thinking, even though he was using heavy machinery, he was thinking eco-mindedly. These are just ones that I like. This is the Hudson River Purge by Buster Simpson. Is that right? Buster. I know his name is Buster, okay? But he made giant, what do you call them, Rolaids? Limestone tablets. You take them for your stomach, like when you have indigestion. What are they called here? Little chalk that you chew on. Huh? It ain't. Yeah. So these are big ones for the Hudson River. He said you need a big pill for a big problem. And he was worried about the acidification of the water table. And so he's being a doctor, you know? What did he say? He said river Rolaids. We call them Rolaids, these things. So, and he's helping acid indigestion. So I thought this was pretty cool. There's pictures of him naked trying. He's been doing it from like, I don't know, 1983 until the present. Something like that. Early on, 1969, Hans Hake did grass grows. And he did one in the gallery, he did one also in the street, a similar thing. Just a pile of soil, not dirt, soil, right? Soil. And let it grow. But he also wrote a manifesto, and some of the things he said is that, and this is really important, that when you're working with life materials, they change over time, right? So he was talking about changing, indeterminate, living in time art that's not stable, that you can't sort of put in a package and keep as memorabilia. All of the works that I ask artists to make in this course, the most important thing is that they have a living component in them when they're exhibited, or at least when they're performed, and that living component actually goes through continued stages of life, so that the art itself is not stable. And I like that. I don't know if you guys know about the Harrisons. They're super. I mean, they're super famous, and they made, a lot of it is maps, but they did some actual work too in the world. But this one is, I just brought for you guys to see, a vision of the green heart of Holland. And this is the idea that we make the center of Holland all green. You know, and you can see there's sort of like green pathways even coming out of it, right? Corridors out from the center in every direction. They wrote a poem about it being a drag, and a green drag, you know. And they do a lot of really nice work, and there's something to me. Okay, so that's that.
Hi, I'm Teun, and I'm with Fo, which is based in Belgium and in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands we're just with 2 people, and I think Adam is interested in this because we're doing lots of stuff with plants. It's not so, in Holland we're not really that interested if it's art or not, we try to do funny things with plants, and we did in Ghent a seed bowling course. And it was with children and with parents and with all kinds of stuff. And it was a bit like this, smaller bucket, but the idea with seed bowling is that you have a way to disperse seeds in the city. And if you just throw them out the window like this, a handful of seeds that the birds would eat them. So that's why you pack them in clay. It's 1 part seeds, and then 5 parts clay, and then 3 parts manure or some other plant material. And you squish it and roll it into a ball, and then usually you let it dry, and you can stuff them in your pockets. And whenever you're in the city and you see a patch where nothing is growing, you can just throw a little seed ball there. So you put in seeds from a group of plants that can work together as a group. For today, since it's a bit late in the season for sowing anyway, we've just gotten some seeds that are fun, and we'll put them together and see what happens. Foam is about 8 people. It's more a network than an institute. So we're dispersed over several countries. There's 2 here. There's about 4 in Belgium, in Brussels. There's a lot of foamies in Great Britain, in the UK, but they don't really operate as a unit. And we're trying to set up a laboratory in Singapore. We're all generalists at foam, so we don't really have specialities. I'm not really a specialist in eco art or anything like that. But we try to incorporate just anything that we like, and we've been working with plants and food, things like that, more the living things for the last 4 years. The turning point was luminous green. It was, I think, 2006, a big, what do you call it? A big get-together of experts from all kinds of fields, biologists, designers, politicians, artists, scientists. And we explored what roles people from the creative industry could play in all the problems that we have as a society, and our lack of, or our inability to work together with the rest of nature. So we tried to build our own windmills, do permaculture, eat the plants, edible wild plants from the environment. We did some biomimicking. I wanted to make a map of edible wild plants in Amsterdam that are publicly accessible, so not owned by anyone. And since I know more about fruit than any other type of plant, it's now mainly places where you can find fruits. And I'm now thinking of joining my map with a map made by Wietske Maas, who has made a very detailed map of edible herbs and some animals too, crayfish, and birds, I think are on it. But I want my map to be only of sources that can take the impact of harvesting. So if it's just a herb, a single little plant, I wouldn't put it on the map, because somebody sees it on the map, goes around, and then it's gone. So I'm looking at slightly more robust sources. But for today it's seed balling.
This is an idea lecture about rewilding from the urban out. So this concept of rewilding I got actually from the Wildlands Project. I can do it in my head, but TWP, I don't want to get it wrong. And that's the guy Dave Forrester from Earth First. He got a call from George Bush right after 9/11. You are not anymore an active part of Earth First, or you are a terrorist. And he said, that's fine, I'm a Wildlands Project man. And the idea is that he moved to the idea of large mammals. Large mammals need to roam, and they have a wide, maybe like a 8-kilometer radius for a bear, you know, and they need to get out of the park. They're stuck. This is what I am. I'm a bear stuck in a park. Okay? All this work, just to let you know, just for that. I can't get out because the park has borders, and after the border, it's a golf course, or a highway, yeah, or the mall. And so his idea was, A, that we should connect all the parks together with wildlife corridors. Anyway, I like the idea of wildlife corridors, but what I thought was, what happens when a wildlife corridor hits a city? How do we get these animals to the next place? And when they come to the city, what do we treat them to? One of the reasons that I knew I should be interested in rewilding is because I went to a Christian right website, and they said rewilding involved Nazi, Illuminati, United Nations crap. And I was like, this has got to be good. These are the same people that said, the UN eventually will have one person, one vote worldwide. And they're shaking. And I'm like, that's a great idea. Only a paranoid right-wing person thought of that. One person, one vote, globally. Neat. So anyway, so when I hear that they're frightened of rewilding, I want to know about it. Well, let's look at when a platypus gets to Times Square. Yeah? Like, how is it? Is it in the tube? Does the tube go through a delicatessen? You know, is Animal Planet there? Are there hunters waiting, you know, with permits? What is the space? Do we just let lions go in Hema, right? In the mall. Like, look, there's lions in the mall. That'd be cool. These are like the totem animals of molecular biology. They're tiny, but they're our mirrors. Like their genomes are sequenced, and when we try to figure out human disease or new shampoos or how to cure baldness, first we try it on a fly or a worm, and these are the ones. So these are also animals that I was trying to figure out, how do we get them out of the lab for like a little tourism, you know, and what is the avenue? I'm just thinking artistically, like even architecturally. One thing I was thinking about while I was working in the lab was that you're working in this sterile field. This is a clean room or an aseptic containment facility. And I did this project called the Workhorse Zoo. After working in like one lab, but visiting like 20 labs, I was at MIT for a couple of years, and I realized they study these animals, each lab has their own animal, right? So I'm a worm lab. Oh, I'm in a fly lab. I'm in a mouse lab. And they don't get them all together. Oh my gosh, that came out really weird. But yeah, they don't get them all together in the clean room. So I decided to get them all together with myself in a clean room, and I lived in there for like a week with these guys. There were mice. There was a dirt floor, kind of like this. You know, I lived with these mice and with some xenopus frogs, the albino xenopus, my friends, my lunch. And I felt what it was like to be stared at as a research subject. Because actually when you're an art spectacle, unless you're really comfortable with it, it's actually not so different than being a lab specimen, except for people who usually don't slice you into little bits and then humanely dispose of you. So this is another thing, if we make like a corridor from the slaughterhouse, right? I know some people who'd like a corridor out of the slaughterhouse for the animals to go run to the city and become disco. But usually the corridor, you know, is by truck, and you know how they end up, right? On the shelf. So I guess I'm looking at, I'm going to build one of these here in Amsterdam, by the way, a big glove box that people can get in if anyone wants to volunteer to be a test subject. I'm looking at what it means to have a field between yourself and organisms, often non-human, sometimes human, right? This separation. But I'm also looking at, you know, what we can do for non-humans to separate ourselves from them in their honor, right? Now, this is weird because this is partly the animal and non-human consciousness art, like trying to make art for non-humans. But I talked to Thune a little bit, and he was sort of like talking about making plants to, you know, mixing seeds with the mud and the clay, sculpting with it, whatnot, and sort of making a corridor by walking through the city that's not for humans, but for insects. And sometimes bees or butterflies we were talking about, but insects that we want to have more of, that we're actually taking care of them by making less of them.
Yeah, so they're also in these kinds of containers. They can't get out.
They're stuck. Yeah. So you're thinking you're making like a wildlife corridor.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that this is non-human enrichment. You know, and actually for the seeds too. The seeds that we're picking are organisms that are not human, and we're letting them go in places that they're not usually let go. Science itself is like a classification system, and it gets weird when you start not only separating, but putting all sorts of things into little boxes, the categories and taxonomies. This is one of my student works, just to give you an idea of Vivo art. This is Michael Rich from San Francisco. I think he's in Southern Cal now, LA. These are all different kinds of gum, like chewing gum, right? So you can see like dental floss gum on the left, and over here, I promise not to walk out of this. Cockroach gum, leather gum, dirt gum, rock gum, pin gum, fingernail gum. So this is sort of like his own personal taxonomy. So I brought a bunch of artists to a professional clean room in San Francisco, and that was really fun because artists are notoriously unclean. You know, like ritually unclean sometimes. So it was fun to go and feel what it was like to be super anal, you know. Other kinds of containment to look at are these actually big containment buildings, right? Because they're approaching architectural corridors, except for they're enclosed. The Eden project is actually nice. It's sort of a botanical garden, like an arboretum in England. It has this sort of geodesic thing with plastic bubbles, but inside they have lots of different biomes. And I thought, that's neat, you know, but I also like the architecture of a giant greenhouse. Because this could be something that we could run right through Amsterdam and not let any humans in, right? And have like a park on either side. That would be cool. And maybe we can have different biome channels, I don't know. But this place, so it's a start. Another one, not so good, is a biosphere, completely based on the idea of a space station, or if the Earth's environment was completely ruined by ourselves, or maybe something beyond us. Go figure. That we would be able to live on inside of these giant space stations. I talked to Wes Jackson at Wes Jackson runs this amazing, he's trying to make wheat perennial in Kansas. He wants to make perennial wheat so we never have to plow the prairie again, and we can still have bread. And he's a biologist, but he came to my workhorse zoo and he said, if it ends up like this, then we're too late. You know, it was a huge failure because bacteria made methane and no one could breathe after a while. Because other organisms were like, this is a great place. So it means it was a success, but not for humans. Yeah? And of course, how do I say this big penis here? You see the penis where it says human habitat is the big penis that oversees everything. Looks exactly like, almost like what we're standing in here, like an anatomical theater. But one of the weirdest photos I got from this was this guy who's inside a giant containment city in scuba gear. So he's like double contained. Really kind of kinky, you know? Now I want to talk about enrichment. A problem with enrichment, the problem that makes us need enrichment is that once you're contained, you're bored, you're neurotic, and you start to chew yourself to death. You know, or pace, like an animal that's stuck in an environment that can't get out, like an animal in the zoo, like probably all of us. You start to walk back and forth and get repetitive motions, and you go into a sort of traumatic shock. And the way out of that, at least according to Disney's Animal Kingdom, along with the American Zoological Society and all zoos, artists here practices this, is to enrich captive organisms. If they're in jail and they didn't commit any crime, they should have more than just a cell. Which means, what does it say here? We need to provide opportunities for animals in captivity to exhibit naturalistic behavior. We need to provide captive animals some control over their environment, and we need to provide environments that enhance well-being and reduce the occurrence of abnormal stereotypic behaviors. That sounds like a Foucaultian biopolitics, right? Where you're sort of like, okay, What can we do to reduce abnormal stereotypic behaviors when you have someone in an awful situation? And the answer is, we haven't done that for ourselves yet, but we can give an elephant a ball, right? The actual technology of animal enrichment, or non-human enrichment, because you can enrich worms too, is in its infancy. It's like almost untouched. It's ready for artists. Some of this works though. Like if you give a great ape a piece of bamboo with peanut butter inside, they will spend 3 hours trying to get that peanut butter out. And without it, they'll like sit there and throw up on themselves and throw it at the crowd, you know? But I think that we could do better. Something tells me. Than giving like opossum stuff from the toy store, you know, this kind of stuff. Jack-o'-lanterns for Halloween, you know, I mean, because you have to get to know them, right? In more ways than one, like ethologically, but also like personally. What they like, do they like to smell things more than they like to play with things? You know, like, so you need scent enrichment. Some students made pornography for orangutans. They caught this orangutan hiding pictures of Elle Macpherson under his bed. He was pulling out pictures of this woman and hiding it under his bed. And they assumed it was because she was redheaded. So then my students made pornography for him, like of other orangutans. So he could put it under his pillow and just be like, okay. We also made something called piñatas. I don't know if you have them here. It's like a Latin American, Mexican tradition. You fill this cardboard thing with candy and you hit it with a blindfold on. But we made them for big cats, so inside there is like dead rabbits, right? And it's in the shape of a pig. And they play just like cats. They're just banging about. And they like to eat, actually they like to eat what's in there better than if you just throw a dead rabbit in a bowl. So this is, just to give you an example, here's a mouse being eaten by a cat. And there's like some sort of cat being eaten by a cat. See? Doesn't that look familiar? It's recognizable, right? So, if you want to check that out, enrichment.org has this great magazine with downloadable PDFs of how to enrich red-handed tamarins and stuff like that. But we're not out of the woods yet. Because we're still doing stuff like this, and this is not enriching the sheep. This is kind of like some sort of demented human pleasure at making nature unnatural, right? And that comes to the fact that we really need to deprogram ourselves. In fact, we're going to go outside really soon and deprogram ourselves. And we need to deprogram ourselves in order to know what to do for the life world next. Because we're so somehow indoctrinated into thinking and feeling a certain way about the world, and we know it's not working. So we have to like actually go into some deep cult sessions or anti-cult sections. Maybe we're all in a cult, right? So we have like blinders over our eyes, and we need to remove them and take the bag or we need to take off the glove. How do we do that? That's a weird question, right? How do you do that? First of all, I think it's something like this. One is to attempt to resist the mind control state through mental firewalls. Apparently people who have been violated by mind control are now capable of instilling in themselves a firewall against mind control. So we gotta work on that. Right now. You ready? Okay, focus. And then focus. And then completely unfocus. And then focus. Okay, one more time. Focus, and then focus. Focus really hard, and then completely unfocus. Okay, just stay like that for forever. So I guess I'm asking again, who's looking through whose window? But also, what's it like to be stuck inside? Because I think a lot of us are. And what's it like to be naked in a wax museum? It's a very important question. To realize that we're all made of these, supposedly we're made of genes, I don't think we are, but genes play a role in us, and we're all related. What does it mean to be a shepherd? Like a herder, right? And what does it mean to be herded? And what's the difference in the level of perversity between being naked and masturbating in the streets and raising goats in a uniform? Right? I think it's almost exactly the same picture if you really think about it. Right? Obviously, I'm interested in what kind of seeds get sown and what kind of seeds don't get sown, right? And I'm interested in the fact that everything that dies brings life with it. In other words, this is an exhibit at the Exploratorium that shows all the organisms that live off of dying or decomposing organisms. So I'm going to teach you a word, and it's called snapping, okay? And this is from Rick Ross, who deprograms people for a fee. You pay him, and he will kidnap your kids or kidnap your parents and deprogram them from their cults. They did a couple of Scientologists. They're especially into left-wing cults, right-wing cults. They don't care. They're for hire. I want him to kidnap someone from every day, and deprogram them from culture itself, right? Just like, tell me when you're done, Rick Ross. But one of the things that he said was this thing called snapping. If a person enters a cult, or it can be, get this, during a lecture, right? It says that right up there. During rituals, which we're about to partake in, and during physical ordeals, you can get snapped into another reality. And then in order to be able to be made to think again, you must be deprogrammed and snapped out of it. Snap out of what you snapped into. Once you've snapped, you're not home free, you're not just snapped out. What does it say? You need to rehabilitate. Anyway, I'm just sort of interested in what this stuff is weird. And I wonder if the Baader Meinhof is a good example of having snapped out. But I'm not sure. Okay? I'm on hold about that one. But I do know that people are dressing their sheep up just in case there's a case of some sort of bioterrorist plot against sheep. They have this new protective wear to keep sheep safe from terrorism. It's kind of weird. So if we can find a way to get out of our plastic bags, we might have to become some kind of animal, some kind of kitsch animal. Let's give it a whirl. Let's go out to the market and make some sculptures. It's a start anyway. That's it.